In the tactics book, there's a chapter called Steamroller. And a steamroller is a tactic that is defensive in nature. It's not something you do, employ, but it's rather something you learn to protect yourself against the kind of person I call a steamroller. And a steamroller is somebody who just steamrollers over the top of you through the force of their personality, with a lot of noise and especially a lot of interruptions. Steamroller is the kind of person who doesn't really want to hear what you have to say. They just want to keep interrupting and pile on a lot of objections in order to shut you down, basically. So I talk about in the book how to deal with that, but I sometimes get a variation of a question regarding steamrollers, and that is, well, how do you deal with a steamroller who steamrolls you in an internet conversation? That is, you're kind of talking back and forth or writing back and forth with posts. And in one sense, strictly speaking, you can't get steamrollered by an internet person in the sense that they keep up interrupting you, because you get to have your say, then they have their say, and you're back and forth. So there's not the interruption that is characteristic of the steamroller approach. However, there is something else that you encounter when you're on the internet, and that is, as one person put it, someone who responds to a Facebook post with several long comments attacking all sorts of things you never said. Well, actually, there's two issues here that can be addressed. The simplest thing to do is to point out in your post that you never said those things, and therefore deflect the challenge in virtue of the fact that they're attacking a point of view that you don't hold, or at least that you didn't say. Now, it might be that this is a view that you didn't advance, that Christianity seems to be vulnerable to, and maybe implicitly you hold it, but you never talked about it, trying to avoid it, and they're raising this issue. That's a little bit different. But if you've been misrepresented on a point, it's entirely legitimate just to respond and say, that's not my view, and let me clarify my view, and then let's start from there. But there's another thing that's going on here, and that is dealing with multiple challenges. And I think it is entirely fair to say to another person, and this is in the book, in dealing with a steamroller style, it's entirely fair to say, well, just one thing at a time. Let's just deal with one thing at a time, one challenge at a time, and when we've dealt with that challenge adequately, we'll move on to the next thing. If you hit me with the shotgun approach where I get a whole bunch of things at once, then I don't know how serious you are about really getting answers, because you're not giving me a chance to respond. So that kind of appeal, I think, is entirely legitimate online. Deal with one thing at a time. Tell the person that you're willing to face up to these things, but let's deal with them one at a time. And that will give you some relief, I think, from these kinds of folk.